Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. The Financial Planning Institute of Southern Africa is proud to present this special webinar as part of Financial Planning Week, an annual consumer initiative aimed at making financial planning the foundation of South Africans' lives. Financial Planning Week aligns with two global campaigns. World Financial Planning Day, hosted by the Financial Planning Standards Board, and World Investor Week, led by the International Organization of Securities Commissions. Under the theme, The Hidden Costs of Breast Cancer, Planning with Risk Cover in recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we aim to raise awareness of the importance of incorporating risk cover into financial planning. We also want to highlight the value of working with a qualified professional and the critical role of early planning and understanding the various risks and costs involved. Our presenter today is Nikki McDonald. She serves as Head of Department Certification at the Financial Planning Institute. Nikki brings a robust legal background and a deep commitment to advancing the future of financial planning and advice in South Africa. Her career spans extensive experience in practice management within a financial services provider, with particular focus on the operational support and procedures that underpin the financial planning advice process. Prior to joining the Financial Planning Institute, Nikki held roles as both a wealth advisor and fiduciary advisor for many years. Her academic contributions include developing course material, setting examinations, and lecturing for the Advanced Diploma in Estate Planning and Trust Administration at the University of the Free State. Nikki holds an LLM in private law, awarded cum laude, as well as an advanced postgrad diploma in financial planning. She was recognized by the University of the Free State with the award for Best Student in the Practical Case Study in 2009 and Best Student in Estate Planning for 2012. She's a certified financial planner professional and holds the Fiduciary Practitioner of South Africa designation from the Fiduciary Institute of Southern Africa. Nikki, thank you for sharing your insights with us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Rihanna, and thank you for the introduction. I see we did start recording. We're going to post this recording later on YouTube. So if you don't find it, see it, or if you want to share it with someone, it will be available on YouTube in a little bit. Why I am here today is exactly what Rihanna said. It is World Financial Planning, well, in our language, month at the FPI, but it coincides with IOSCO's Investor Week. The IOSCO, as Rihanna said, is the International Organization of Securities Commission, and the 8th of where are we? October already. I can't believe it. The 8th of October is World Financial Planning Day across the globe, where all the affiliates of the Financial Planning Standard Board get together and we celebrate financial planning and make people aware of how a financial planner can benefit you. Now, in addition to that, sorry, I just want to make sure that I am sharing my slides with you. There we go. And in addition to all of those weeks and days that is happening, October is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. You'll see that I'm wearing my pink, and I got a pink little ribbon here from our office this morning. So what we decided to do is, with all of these dates coinciding, is to talk about breast cancer today, make you aware of what the risks are, but then specifically speak about the cost of these risks and how you, as a financial end user of products, can ensure that you manage that risk, but also where to find the help, because I promise I'm going to confuse you at some point today. So once you're really confused, I'm going to guide you to a financial planner to help you untangle all of these elements. So I'm going to speak about breast cancer, but one of the things that I want to make very clear is that the principles that I will be discussing this afternoon that is important to consumers should be applied not just to breast cancer, but it's the same for all kinds of other cancers. It's the same for any other severe illness, things like heart attacks, things like strokes, any other severe illness that you can think of. The same principles apply. So when you're looking at solving this problem for yourself, think about everything that can go wrong and then work according to that. So let's speak breast cancer today, though. Breast cancer is the most common cancer among South African women, and it accounts for 23.2% of all female cancers. The lifetime risk for South African women is approximately 1 in 27. It is fairly high. I think we all know someone that has either had breast cancer or has breast cancer at the moment. Many of us have a history of breast cancer in our families. So I think for most people, and I'm going to speak about men later because it's not only women, but specifically for women, it is quite prevalent and it is very close to our hearts. We have to make sure that we look after ourselves when it comes to breast cancer. Then the bigger concern that we've got is that there is a growing incidence among younger women, especially those aged 40 to 49. And diagnosis in this group is rising from 90.4% in 2012, and 10 years later is actually 26.8%. So across a decade, the incidence of breast cancer has upped by about 10 years. Now, obviously, there's also a question to be asked. Is it because of more cancer or because of better diagnosis? I don't know, but it is very real that there will be breast cancer issues at some point during the time. I just want to add, sorry, I'm interrupting myself here. I will take questions. If you type them in the question in the chat box, I will take questions throughout, and we will unmute your mics when I call on you if there's something that you want to ask. So back to the breast cancer, alarmingly, 20% of cases occur in women under 40. Average age of diagnosis is about 34 years, and younger women there often present with more aggressive subtypes. Then it's not only women that can get breast cancer, men can also get breast cancer. Male breast cancer accounts for 1.8% of all breast cancer cases in South Africa. But what is alarming is that it is almost double what the international average is. That is less than 1%. And in South Africa, it's almost 2%. So it's not very prevalent, but it can happen. And incidences are rising. Cases now seen in men as young as 27 and 32 years old. Late stage diagnosis is common. And this is what's very important, and I want you to listen to this statistic. Late stage diagnosis, people are only diagnosed with breast cancer 50 to 80% of the time when they are already in stages 3 or 4. That means that they're going towards the end of the aggressiveness and where the cancer is going. So it takes a little bit more time. It takes time. Tanya, if you can't hear anything, maybe have a look at your settings under the 3 little dots. And if you maybe change your audio settings to another speaker, it might work. Early detection dramatically improves the outcomes of breast cancer. Now, 90% of patients survive for many years, or beat the cancer altogether, if it's diagnosed early. So the earlier you get to a doctor, if you even think might be something wrong with you, your chances of surviving breast cancer is really, really good. Our doctors are getting better and better at the treatments. The technology cancer technology or the technology in treatment and the research that they are doing is getting better every single year. It is so important that we make sure that if you do get breast cancer, that you get diagnosed early, because it ups your chances incrementally to be cured of breast cancer. Now, how do I know or whether to be concerned? I just took a few things from the breast cancer awareness website here to show to you. You have to make sure that you do your own breast examinations. Anything that is linked to the following: a lump or thickening in the breast or underarm area, often painless and hard, changes to your nipples, skin changes, size or shape changes in one breast that is maybe bigger than the others, swelling or shrinking. And then also, but to note, not all breast cancers present with a lump, and early stage cancer may show no symptoms whatsoever. So how do we make sure that we pick that up? First of all, you have to look after yourself. You have to do your own breast examinations. But then also, when you go to your doctor in your checkup once a year, or when you go to your gynecologist, they will also do a breast exam and see if there's anything wrong. If you are 40 or over, ensure that you go for your mammogram once a year, or then once every second year, depending on what your medical aid pays for. I know in most above 40s or above 45s, they do cover it in their supplemental benefits. And then high-risk individuals now should begin earlier and may need annual MRIs. Now, what I want to show you is in this last little bit, everything that you're going to do there, except your self-breast examination, is already costing you money. So you haven't even been diagnosed yet, but it's already costing you money. Your clinical your clinical exams, when you go to the gynecologist once a year, or when you go to your GP once a year, that appointment has to be paid for. Mammograms has to be paid for. If you are in a high-risk situation and they do additional tests every year to see if cancer is developing, that definitely has to be paid for. And I don't know if you know how much an MRI costs these days, if you have to pay it out of pocket, but that is just the start of it. So already, even though you don't have breast cancer, there are out-of-pocket expenses. Now, what happens if I actually do get it? And as I've said, this is not just breast cancer. It's all types of cancers and any other severe illness that might affect your standard of living and your ability to work. Now, let's have a look at some costs that you might incur. If we look at the treatment of breast cancer, you get things like chemotherapy, hormone therapy, radiation, targeted therapies. There's even some specialized therapies and experimental therapies that we don't even know about. As you know, this costs money. It can run into hundreds of thousands depending on how often you have to go for the treatment, how long it takes. There might be surgery involved. That is additional cost. And all of those are possible out-of-pocket expenses. And many of us cannot afford those out-of-pocket expenses, even with savings or investments, because it can be such big amounts. It can really ruin you if you do not have some kind of cover for it. And as we always say, that the public institutions are there. But I think in a situation like this, you want to make sure that you've got options to go to doctors where you're going to receive treatment immediately. You're going to be helped immediately. And that is unfortunately not the case in the public health system. There you might have to wait until something becomes available. They might not have the type of therapy available to you that you might need. There might be long queues and all of those things that can go wrong. And I'm pretty sure you do not want that. Then there's additional costs that we're not even thinking about. Things like counseling, because it's very hard for people to go through these protracted chemotherapy. It's very hard to deal with the diagnosis of a critical illness. There is therapy maybe for your loved ones and your family that is around you that you might want at that point in time. Rehabilitation is another one. There are step-down facilities after you've come from surgery, for example, while you're getting better to go home. You might also have to pay for that out of pocket to a certain extent. Travel expenses. I follow someone on Facebook who came from the Netherlands but is now a South African citizen. And she has got breast cancer, but they live in the bush, beautiful place up here in Mpumalanga somewhere. And she has to travel 700 kilometers every time she has to go for the chemotherapy. 700 kilometers every 2-3 weeks. It really does become a lot of money because it might be not just the traveling, but also staying over if you don't feel good enough to come home at that point in time, and so on and so forth. So think about those things that will have to be paid if you are diagnosed with a critical illness. And then time off work. If you get diagnosed with a critical illness, you have got 30 days worth of sick leave if you have worked for your company for more than a year. 30 days worth of sick leave for something like this is not a lot. Chances are very good that for a certain period, just after the diagnosis, you will not be able to work at all. Those 30 days are going to run out so fast, and then you're on unpaid leave. If you do not earn an income while you're having these extra expenses, how are you going to survive? What is going to give? That is something that we have to make sure that you do not get into that position. So, from a financial planner, it sounds fairly scary, and I think it is. I think what can make it easier is if you do get in that position and you do know that my financial plan for critical illness is 100% in place. I know where the money is going to come from. I know what is going to pay for what. I know that there will be the minimal expense that I might have to pay from my own pocket. And my financial planner is going to help me at every step of this stage. And when I say every step of the stage, and I'll speak about the financial planners again at the end, your financial planner is not only there to help you to put all of these different layers of protection in place, help you wade through the difficult terms and terminologies and the difficult types of products that are available to make sure that you get the correct one for your situation. But also, the day something happens and you get diagnosed with that critical illness, they will be there to help you with the claims process, to deal with the companies, to make sure that you are not caught up in all of the paperwork that goes together with that. That is one of the reasons why I am a certified financial planner, but why I also have a certified financial planner that advises me, because if something like that happens, neither myself nor my husband is going to feel like dealing with paperwork, but I have someone with a structured office who will actually be able to help me at that point in time. So how do we plan for being able to survive financially through a crisis like this? First of all, look at your medical aid. If you do not have a medical aid, that is one of the first things you have to look out for and that you maybe have to put in place. It does not necessarily need to be the most comprehensive or the most expensive medical aid that there is out there. Things like hospital plans that cover in cost hospital everything that gets paid in hospital, that might be enough for you in your situation. A more comprehensive plan might be right for you. That is what you and your financial planner will decide when you get there. But there's a few very important things to ask. First of all, and I didn't even add that question, is it a medical aid that falls under the Medical Aid Schemes Act? Or is it a medical insurance plan? Those two things are very different. A medical aid is governed by the Council for Medical Schemes. It is governed by the legislation that is in place. It is a plan in which certain areas are covered. It is something like for Discovery Medical Aid, a Momentum Health, a PPS, Bonitas, or any of those, or GEMS. Those are medical aids. They fall under the Medical Aid Schemes Act. That is the type of cover that you want behind you. You get other insurance-linked medical products. They call it policies. It's medical policies. Those normally pay a per day expense if you land in hospital, or maybe if you're on an accident, or those type of things. Those are linked to short-term regulations, and those are not medical schemes. In order for everything else to work, it has to be a medical scheme. Then you have to make sure that this medical scheme, that you understand what the cancer cover looks like. Now, there are many different options. Some of them say that we will pay an amount of 500,000 Rand for cancer over 2 years, and that's it. 500,000 is your limit, and once that is done, it's done. We're not paying any further. Then there are others that say, I will pay a 500,000 Rand for 1 year, and anything after that, you will have a 30% co-payment. So if your claims goes above the 500,000 Rand mark, you will have to start paying in. And sometimes those co-payments can be quite hefty. You also have on your more comprehensive expensive plans, unlimited cover for cancer or for other critical illnesses. Make sure that you understand exactly where they are going to stop covering, because what we've seen in the past, especially when I was still in practice, is that those limits, especially if it's fairly aggressive cancer and there has to be lots of chemo and maybe some experimental or more expensive treatment, that money can run out fairly fast. So make sure that you are covered for the out-of-pocket expenses that happens on the top of it, but make sure that you understand what they're covering. I've spoken about the limit or the co-payment on treatment. Then your next question, and if you don't want to ask it to your medical schemes itself, ask your financial planner or advisor to explain it to you. What medical scheme rate do they cover? Now, what is a medical scheme rate? It is a rate that the medical scheme says that they will pay for a certain procedure. So let's say I have to have my gallbladder removed, for example, and the medical aid says for this specific procedure, I will cover 10,000 Rand. That is my medical scheme rate. That is 100%. Some of the plans only pay up to 30,000, or what did I say? 10,000 Rand. Sorry, I used the example of 10,000 Rand. If my doctor decide to charge 15,000 Rand, which they can. Doctors are not limited to medical scheme rates. They can charge as much as they want to. Another good question to ask your doctor, by the way. If they charge more than the 100% medical scheme rate, you are going to have to pay the difference. So if your plan only pays 100% medical scheme rate, that is where your payment from the medical scheme will be capped. The rest will be paid either by your medical savings account or by yourself. Should they cover 200% and your doctor charges 150%, for example, that you will be fine then. But make sure you understand exactly what is charged. And I love the comment that Dorcas just made. Yeah, medical aids need to come to the party. Yeah, I will speak about that, as most do not pay for mammograms for women under the ages of 40. I agree with you. Some conversations need to happen there, although I'm fairly sure that if you write a recommendation from your doctor, especially if you're high risk, they might cover it. But just double check me on that. I'm not 100% sure. Also, another thing is, remember that you can speak to your doctor. Make sure, if you're comfortable, that they also understand that if you are on 100% medical scheme rate plan, that they do not charge above it. I know I came from, before I was at FBI, I used to stay in Bloem. Doctors there were very happy to stick to the 100% rates, but here in Joburg, I've seen up to 600 and 700% rates that they charge, which means you're sitting with a ridiculous amount of co-payment that you have to pay in. So make sure that you understand exactly what your medical scheme rate is and double check that with your doctor. What treatments are covered are also important. On your more expensive plans, you're going to find that they will cover some new treatments, some more experimental treatments, where on your hospital plans and cheaper plans with just a medical savings account, that might not be that might not be covered. But that's also something that you can have a look at. Obviously, if you want the Lamborghini, you're going to have to pay for it. Most of us can just afford the Toyota Corolla, so we pay for the Toyota Corolla. And then the question is, will you be able to fund the difference if you get into trouble, if there's any medical claims? That is always the question. And that is what we're trying to ensure. Now, what's your answer? Or one of the answers to this? Have a look at gap cover. Now, you have to understand what gap cover is. Gap cover is a product that we put on top of your medical aid. It is listed under short-term insurance law, so it's a short-term insurance product. What happens in terms of the gap cover and their rules and regulations? They will cover most of the co-payments above a certain percentage that you might have within certain limitations. Once again, you get cheaper gap covers that will only cover a certain amount, and then you get other gap covers that are a little bit more expensive that might cover more. So look at a combination of the two. If your medical aid, for example, has limits on your cancer cover, that is maybe up to a 500,000 and then a percentage after that, your gap cover will cover up to a certain limit those co-payments that you've got after that. Also, your gap cover will cover things like if it's 100% medical scheme rate, they will maybe, and the doctor charges maybe 200, they will have a look at that top up. But one of the most important things that you have to understand is that it can only be used in conjunction with the existing medical aid. So we literally put that on top of the medical aid. You cannot use it with a medical policy, cannot use it with any other medical insurance type products, and it can't stand alone. It is to cover that risk and that gap that you would maybe have if there is a claim in terms of your medical aid. Also, what you have to remember, certain of the gap covers do not pay directly to the provider. You have to settle the bill first. I had an operation not too long ago. I had to settle the co-pays. I had to submit it to the gap cover, and they then paid me back, and I then paid the provider back. So you have to make sure that you are able to cover that copay in the meantime in order for you to get your money back. So it does cover the gaps. It does give you the money back, but it is quite a protracted process, and you might not have the money immediately. It might take you 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month to get the money back into your account to pay the well, you've already paid it to pay it back. So just keep an eye out for that. Then, what happens if you can't work? As I said, you only have 30 sick leave days. And after that, unless your employer really loves you, and I promise you they're not going to love you forever, you're going to sit in a position where if you're really sick, you're going to have to take unpaid leave. None of us can afford to take unpaid leave if you're salaried. In most cases, we need that monthly salary to survive. This is where income replacement is very important. And this is not just in the case of critical illness, but also if you're disabled and something happens to you and you can't work. So this product I'm talking about specifically in the context of a critical illness, but it also plays a very big role in cases where you get disabled. So what happens is that it can be either a temporary temporary income protector that will pay out for, let's say, 6 months. So it means that in the case of cancer, it might be prevalent. You have got cancer, but your prognosis is good. But for the next 3 to 6 months, you're going to have to go for chemotherapy, and you're going to have to go for radiation and maybe other treatments that is going to keep you away from work for quite a while until the end of the process and where they can declare you in remission. That temporary income protector will look after you for that period of time and will replace 75% of your income monthly. Now, 75% does not sound like a lot, But remember that that is tax-free. That payment that you get from your income protector is tax-free. Therefore, it should be sufficient to help you pay your bills for the time frame that you are actually not able to work. There will be certain waiting periods linked to income protectors. It might be as little as 7 days if you're self-employed, or it might be as much as 3 months. That you just have to make sure of, because if your income protector is only going to kick in after X amount of time, you have to make sure that you fund that difference yourself. So have a look at the terms of that. And also make 100% sure that you understand in which cases it will pay out and in which circumstances. Once again, you get your more expensive income protectors that covers a wide array of conditions in which you will be deemed disabled or not able to work, and the income protection will start paying out. And you get your less expensive income protectors, maybe longer waiting periods, that is maybe more affordable, but that will mean you'll have to wait a little bit longer, and it will not necessarily pay out in all the circumstances or the scenarios that you might envision. So understand exactly when, how this will pay out. Then critical illness cover. And you will see that I put it last, because in all cases, critical illness cover is a fairly, in line with all of the other things we've spoken about, it is a fairly expensive sort of insurance. Not unaffordable, but it's more expensive than things like disability and life cover, for example, would be. Everybody needs critical illness cover, in my opinion, but it is not a necessity. You can plan for it in other ways and means as well. So what does critical illness cover do? It pays a lump sum, or in most cases a lump sum, but there are some companies that offer it in a monthly payment when you are diagnosed with a critical illness. Now, there are two very important ways that you can be underwritten for critical illness, and I want you to listen to this very carefully. The first one is by being underwritten. That means if I go to a company and I say, I want 1 million rands worth of critical illness cover, they're going to look at me. They're going to say, Nikki, you are this old. You have got, do you smoke or not? Because that has a very big impact on your premium. Non-smokers' premiums are lots cheaper than smokers' premiums are. That includes vaping, by the way. So they're going to look at that. They're going to look at my gender, am I male or female? Females tend to live longer, so there's all kinds of actuarial calculation that goes back on the backside. They're going to look at my highest qualification and also my income. Those are the risk factors that's going to firstly determine your premium. And then they're going to look at me and say, Nikki, but you have got issues with, let's say, you've got high blood pressure and you have a family history of diabetes or whatever the situation might be, we're going to send you for some tests to make sure that we take on the risk that we are prepared to take on. I will then go to the doctor, have my blood taken. They will have a look at everything that is needed, and they will say, the company will come back and say, we are prepared to offer you the million rands life cover at, if you're the normal premium that we quoted you. If you are a higher risk client, they will maybe add a loading, or they can say, we will pay out except if you get diabetes, and I will have to accept the exclusion or not. So there's different ways in which they deal with it. But the most important thing is, if you declare everything to them that has gone on with your health in the last while, and actually not in the last while, forever, they need your whole history and your family history. You go for the test and it is underwritten at that point. The claim stage becomes a lot easier, and you don't have to worry about whether they're going to pay out or not if everything is done correctly. There's a second kind of medical aid insurance, and we mostly get it through these call centers that phone you up and say, I want to sell you a life cover for women's cancer or whatever the situation might be. And we're going to give it to you, and you don't have to go for any medical tests. That sounds all well and good, and it's fairly easy to implement, and you just pay the premium and there you go. But what the problem is is that payment gets underwritten once the premium or once the claim arises. So the underwriting happens at the end. So they will come back and say, but whoa, wait a second. Maybe, just maybe, you didn't declare it to us, and that claim that you have now put in was already manifesting when you took out the policy. And it's very difficult to prove that it wasn't that case. So as certified financial planners, we tend to stay away from non-underwritten life cover and other risk benefits, and maybe have a look at the underwritten life cover because you know exactly what you're in for. So just be careful. Also make sure exactly what you're covered for. Is it full cover? Will it pay out whether you're stage 1, 2, 3, 4 of cancer diagnosis, or will it pay out percentages, 25 or 50 or 75 or 100% in those cases? It all differs, and it also affects the premiums that you will pay. And then get comparative quotes. Not all critical illness cover products are equal. That's not the same. And sometimes some insurance companies offer better deals than others, and there's better cover available. So make sure that you do your homework. I want to, especially on the understanding exactly what is covered. When I still practiced, before I started at FBI, we had a client whose wife was fairly heavily insured for female cancers through one of these non-underwriting companies. Not going to say which one. But she was basically covered for vaginal cancers, for breast cancer, and those type of things. Her husband was insistent that we didn't have to take a look at her cover because they were fairly sure that it was in place. And she then got cancer and passed away about 6 months later. It was fairly aggressive. The problem was that she got lymph node cancer, and not any female cancer, which means those policies did not pay out, and there was no cover in place. If we had had a look at that, we would have dissected it. And afterwards, I actually did a comparative premium, and the premiums that she paid for those two policies would have covered more in an underwritten policy on critical illness than those two policies. Do your homework. It is fairly easy for people to phone you up and say, oh, we'll cover you for this and this and that. Make sure that it's the best product out there and that it gives you the best cover, no matter what the situation might be. Confused yet? I said you're going to be confused at some point. It's a lot of products that we're talking about, and every one of them does something else. I also want to add a caveat. Remember that in all of these cases, in order for you to get these payouts, take some time. Make sure that there's an emergency fund in place, that you can start covering some costs out of your pocket and don't have to dip into debt or into savings. But make sure that there is a bit of money set one side where you can start funding these things while the time is taken to do your critical claims policy, to claim from the gap cover, to get the income protection after, let's say, 30 days or 2 months in place. Make sure that you plan for enough time. How are we going to fix this? Speak to a financial planner. I cannot stress this enough. Even before you talk savings, before you talk retirement, before you talk, I want to save for my kids' education, I want to go on an overseas holiday, I want to build my wealth. Make sure that the risks that are going to severely affect you, and out-of-pocket payment that might have to make you sell your car or your house, does not happen to you. Risk cover always is a sort of grudge purchase because you can pay a life cover and pay critical illness cover for years and never develop any critical illness. But the flip side is also true. You can take out this policy today and be diagnosed with something in 2 or 3 months' time. So make sure that you don't just give attention to your investment side, but definitely to the risk side. In fact, if you add things like life cover and disability to it, I think it's actually more important, especially for young people, people who has got debt to cover, people who have got children, people who have got spouses that might need to be looked after if something happens or if you're not there anymore. Risk cover, medical aid it's not even a no-go. Maybe you can start small and build it up, but make sure that you speak to someone. So your financial planner, what will they do? They will firstly help you to put this plan together to say, okay, how do we address all these risks? How do we make sure that you're covered? They will then tell you that the best products in the market out there that is specifically tailored to you, and that's why I say no two people's plans can be the same, and that will suit you best is this and this and that. We can only afford this, but let's see, maybe in a year's time, we can add a little bit. We can maybe grow the premium over time a little bit, or the cover, or whatever the situation might be. Things change. Every time something changes, your financial planner will once again take your hand and walk you through that. Every year, your plan will be reviewed. We will have a look and say, oh, but something, maybe we need to change this. Maybe we need to add a little bit here. Maybe your needs have changed. There's another kid on the way. We have to adjust. So that's the type of work that your financial planner can do for you. And I can tell you in all honesty, it's been proven in the research that ourselves, as well as the Financial Planning Standards Board, has been done, that the main motivation for you having a financial planner is the peace of mind that goes along with this. To know that there's someone you can call to explain all of these difficult concepts to you, that there is someone who will put a plan in place for you, and that there's someone who will hold your hand when the diagnoses do come and you need to navigate all these different companies and different products and their claims. So if you go to fbimymoney123.co.za, find a financial planner, type in your area where you are, and you will find a certified financial planner, a financial services advisor, or a registered financial practitioner that is registered with the Financial Planning Institute of Southern Africa. And you know that you will get quality advice from that person. The main aim of any financial planner should not be to fill their pockets with commission, but it should be to help the client, put the client first, and ensure that your future is solid. Well, Rihanna, I said I am going to maybe not speak for an entire hour, but we've got 15 minutes left. So I don't know if there's any questions in the chat for me, or otherwise I'm going to give everybody 15 minutes of your time back.
Nikki, no, there's no other questions, but can I ask a question?
Please do.
So, at what stage in your life should you be thinking about risk cover and critical illness cover? When you're 20, when you're 40, when do you start?
That's a very good question. I would say the first risk cover that you have to consider, first two types of risk cover that you have to consider, and that is from the moment you start earning an income, whether you're self-employed or whether you're employed by a third party, is when you earn your first paycheck. Because medical aid, and medical aid even before that, the moment you come off, if you're lucky enough to be on a medical aid with your parents and you turn, because we're sitting in the situation where my son is turning 21 next year and his premium is going to go up incrementally, we're putting him straight onto his own medical aid, because you shouldn't miss a beat there. That should carry on either on your parents or on your own. So medical aid is the first thing that we have to look after. At that age, maybe you don't need a gap cover because you hardly ever get sick, that type of thing. But then the most important thing once you start earning a salary is to look after income protection. Your ability to earn an income is the biggest wealth generator that there is. And if that is not insured, no matter whether you're 20 years old or 40 or 50, it starts becoming less important the closer you get to retirement. But during your working life, income protection should be in place from the very beginning. In many cases, we're lucky enough that if you work for an employer and they've got a group benefit fund, that will be included there. And then if we look at other types of risk cover, life insurance really becomes important when you start with a family, or when you go into, or you get married, or you go into debt. Let's say you buy a property and you have to have life insurance to cover the bond, for example, or to look after loved ones, or to pay debt, or to look after children. That's when life cover becomes important. And then things like a disability lump sum policies, that works well with the income protector, but your financial planner can help with that. And critical illness, as I say, is something that you can consider from your first paycheck onward. Although as you get older and your risk for developing critical illness becomes bigger, that is actually where it is most important.
Thank you, Nikki. And then we do have some questions. I've got a question here. Please, can you advise if a disability policy with my employer covers for cancer and other illness if I'm not able to work?
That is where you can ask for a detailed statement on your cover. They will be able to tell you exactly what you're covered for, in which cases you're covered, does it cover critical illness, when does it pay out, specifically disability. And I'm saying this as a caveat, don't hold me to it, but in most cases, disability is a more difficult claim than severe illness. There's a higher burden on the claimant to prove that they actually can't function in a job setup, which is where disability comes in, where a critical illness claim is I was diagnosed with cancer, here's the report from my doctor, there you go. So that's also why critical illness is a little bit more expensive. A critical illness cover really is a checklist, or am I covered or am I not covered? So I know a lot of policies with employers sometimes don't have critical illness in there. They may be covered, they have an income protector and a disability lump sum and life cover, but as critical illness is fairly expensive, it's not always included. So what I would suggest is request a statement and go see a financial planner. Let them lay it out for you and explain to you exactly what you're covered for and for what, and maybe then consider adding something on the side, an additional policy if needs to, or any of the other things that I've spoken about. Any good financial planner will take you through the same process as I've just explained to you.
Thank you, Nikki. There was a comment saying very informative, as I have a couple of breast cancer client diagnoses as we speak. So it has been valuable.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to add something if you're a financial planner listening. Getting a cancer diagnosis may be one of the biggest crisis experiences or crisis moments in any client's life. No matter how serious or non-serious it is life-changing. And if you can be there for your clients to make their lives easier by helping with claims, reassuring, checking up on them, making sure that everything is in place, you are adding value far bigger than any premium or that they have ever paid, or any commission that they have ever paid to you. And that's where the value of financial planning comes in. You'll have a client for life and somebody that refers each and every person they know to you. So make sure that is set up from the beginning, that you will be there when these type of moments happen in your client's life. I think that's where we make a big difference. Good. If there's no other questions, thank you so much for having me, Rihanna.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you to everybody that joined us online. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel, so you can watch out for that. Give us about 3 weeks or so. It is the FPI convention, so the team is very busy, but it will definitely be on the YouTube channel.
And keep an eye out. We've got 3 more webinars this week, every day for Financial Planning Week. So have a look and join us again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.